Writing with your host, James Kelly. For the next 60 minutes, we'll explore every aspect of writing, including how to create, format, and even sell your work. The phone lines are open at 731-1230. That's 731-1230. Or toll free 1-866-820-KLAV. Now, let's get right. Here's your host, James Kelly.
Hello and welcome to Aspects of Writing here on KLAV. I'm your host, James Kelly. On your computer, you can listen to this podcast live at KLAV1230am.com. We're also broadcasting live on youtube.com/Aspects of Writing, and when you put that in, Aspects of Writing is all one word. The topic of today's show is Writing from Life's Experiences, Part 2. We just covered this 2 weeks ago, and we're going to continue with this series because basically everyone writes from life's experiences. Our guests for today's shows are author Linda Jarosz, Nancy Nelson, and Renee Mollan-Masters. Linda is the author of Detour, Fossil Creek Estates. Renee Mollan-Masters is the author of You Are Smarter Than You Think, and Nancy Nelson is the author of the book of poems called Blue.River.Apple. But before we get to our authors, my pal and I would like to read a few fun quotes about today's topic, and we're going to start off with Nancy.
Well, I found one that's quite appropriate. The price of a memory is the memory of the sorrow it brings. It comes from Pittacus Lore, who is the author of I Am Number 4, which is an alien-themed child's sci-fi. And how apropos, huh?
All right, and Jan?
I am glad that I paid little attention to good advice. Had I abided by it, I might have been saved from some of my most valuable mistakes. Edna St. Vincent Mala.
And Renee? Renee, are you there?
Aww.
I think we just lost Renee. We'll get her back in a minute. Dana, would you like to go? Dana, are you there? Well, I guess we lost our phone connections.
Dana's back.
Oh, Dana, are you back? Yeah. All right. Linda, would you like...
I was just saying to Janet how apropos this quote is. I used to think I knew all the answers. Then I thought I knew maybe a few of the answers. Now I'm not even sure I understand the questions. Nobody knows anything. This is from Pete Nelson. I thought you were dead.
I love it.
Okay. Dana, are you online? All right. I think our board man's trying to connect us here. There we go. All right, I'm going to read the next one. Wisdom is the reward for surviving our own stupidity. Brian Rathbone Regent from the book Regent. And Dana, do we have you online or Lynn? So we have Linda in the studio. So Renee. All right, well, we'll pick them up. He'll let us know when they're online. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Aspects of Writing with me, your host, James Kelly, here on KLAV, along with my co-host, Dana Micheli and Janet Coursey. Again, on your computer, you can listen to this broadcast live at KLAV1230am.com. Our guests for today's show are authors Linda Jarosz, Nancy Nelson, and Renee Mollan-Masters. Did I say that right, Linda?
Yes,
oh,
you did.
thank you.
Yeah.
But before we get to know a little more about our guest, let's go over to Janet Coursey for a segment we call Jan's Review. Jan?
Hey, I love this one. Bring in the Right-Hander, My 22 Years in the Major Leagues by Jerry Royce. And I didn't think I'd really like a sports book, but this is not really a sports book, although it's only about sports. I was so impressed by this book. Not only can this man play baseball, but he can write. Thought I'd have only, even though I've only attended a few games in my lifetime, I truly enjoy this sport. During Jerry Royce's career, we were in the midst of the Vietnam War. Baseball was a pleasant distraction from that reality. It gave us something else to talk about. After all, baseball is all-American sport. Even Chevrolet incorporated it into their ads during the 1970s. I'm sure everybody remembers baseball, hot dogs, apple pie, and Chevrolet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sure do.
Jerry's book chronicles his life in the major leagues, and he began his career in 1967, actually, but really 1969. However, Jerry shared in his book and how his career really began many years earlier when he was just a child, beginning with the first game his dad took him and his brothers to. From that point forward, Jerry knew what he wanted to do in life was be a baseball player. In his book, Jerry shares with us the words spoken in the dugouts, on the field, and in the locker room. Some were surprising, others expected. Jerry's stories made me laugh, and part of that book even made me cry when he talks about the last time up on the mound.
Oh.
But I mostly enjoyed the honesty of his story. Jerry doesn't paint himself as a superhero. Rather, he paints a picture of a true blue baseball player and about the real world of Major League. I recommend this book as a must-read for every young person. It is such an uplifting and positive story. All can benefit from it and Jerry's life lessons. He continued dedication to this game is an inspiration, as he is. In addition to being a former Major League Baseball player and author, Jerry also has a passion for photographs. I have had the pleasure of talking with Jerry on many occasions and found him to be so approachable, honest, and friendly. To learn more about Jerry Royce, please visit his website for his photos at www.flickr.com/photos/Jerry Royce. Jerry's book, Bring in the Right-Hander, My 22 Years in the Major League, is available on Amazon. And this book is a great read for the summer, and I give it 5 stars and 2 thumbs up.
All right. Dana, are you online? And Renee?
I am.
Renee, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, welcome to the show. Well, we skipped a little bit. That's okay, though. We're going to go right on into the next part of it. You are listening to Aspects of Writing with me, your host, James Kelly, along with my co-host, Dana Micheli and Janet Coursey. On your computer, again, you can listen to this show live at KLAV1230am.com. Our guests for today's show are authors Linda Jarosz, Nancy Nelson, and Renee Mollan-Masters. Our first guest is Linda Jarosz, thank goodness. Linda is the author of Detroit Fossil Creek Estates. Linda, please tell our listeners a little bit about your book.
Okay, be glad to. This is my first work of fiction. It's about a couple, Rob and Lane Fisher, who live in New York City and have made plans to retire to Mexico. Their plans get upended, however, when Lane's father dies. He's a widower. He lives in a retirement community in southern Nevada, Fossil Creek Estates. He leaves half the house to her and half the house to her ne'er-do-well brother, Chris, with whom she does not get along. So that kind of derails their plans for the moment. And in the meantime, they have already given up their apartment in New York City. So they have no choice but to move to the retirement community. They think, oh, no problem, we'll just settle, we'll buy Chris out, we'll sell the house, and we'll go our merry way on to Mexico. Not so fast. And the stories and the events and the situations detail what some of the people, the obstacles, the situations that get in the way of their going to Mexico. And the whole overarching question throughout the book is, will they get to Mexico?
Oh, okay. All right.
Sounds like fun.
And Dana, do you have any questions for Linda?
Yeah, it sounds like such a great book.
Yeah.
Where did you get the idea?
Well, since we're talking about writing from our life experiences, I got the idea just from my community. I live in a retirement community, and there is no shortage of ideas or material in my community. I went there naively thinking these were a bunch of laid-back, retired people that had nothing to prove to anything. And I've learned some very interesting things in the 8 years that I've lived there.
And this is actually there is a story not exactly like this, but it's based on something similar that you know of someone that had a home and.
Well, no, actually, I didn't. The story. Lane and Rob are a little bit like my husband and I, but we never intended to retire to Mexico. But no, I just some of the situations, yes, come from reality, but most of it's fiction or composites of situations.
Okay.
Well, most of us start living at 60. So, what was your background leading up to writing this book?
Well, my background is actually business and academic writing. I published my first business article in a little newspaper, a free newspaper that circulated around Portland, Oregon. At the time I lived there, I was personnel manager for a small manufacturing company. So I wrote this article, should you start a personnel department? And they printed it. And then from there on, I moved into professional journals like Personnel Journal, which is now HRM, Supervision. And then in 1999, I published a textbook through Prentice Hall called Human Resource Management in the Hospitality Industry, because I worked in the hospitality industry for several years as well.
Okay.
So, and then now for the last 12 years, I have been helping PhD dissertation students develop and edit their proposals and their finished work.
Mhm.
So I've been writing for quite a while, but Detour is my first attempt at fiction.
Do you have other works in the making?
I do. I'm working on another novel. It will take place in Fossil Creek Estates.
Surprise.
Of course it will.
It will be a different story. It will be different characters.
Okay.
I may cameo some of the ones from the previous book, but I haven't decided that yet. But I am working on that now.
Mm-hmm. Just out of curiosity, would anyone where you live think that any of these stories might be about them?
Yes. I've had some really interesting questions. This person, was that really true, or who is, I think that's so and so. And it turns out it could be, but they're all composites. There are a couple of situations in the book that really are true,
Mhm.
but the names have been changed, of course.
Okay. And where can we learn more about your work?
You can visit my Amazon site, www.amazon.com/author/Linda Jarosz. I have a Facebook page, Linda Jarosz Author. And on August 9th, I am doing a book signing at the Henderson Barnes & Noble
Oh, great.
from 1 to 3 at 567 Stephanie Street, North Stephanie Street.
All right. Fantastic.
You want to spell your last name for everybody?
Yes, please.
Yes, it's Linda Jarosz, Jarosz.
Okay. All right. We got that out of the way. All right. And Renee, you're our next guest, and you wrote you are smarter than you think. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I have been, about 25 years ago, I had an experience with Dr. Howard Gardner's research, and I had been a schizophrenic kind of learner when I was in school. One minute I was good, one minute I wasn't. And when I bumped into Dr. Howard Gardner's work, I suddenly realized that everybody learns very differently, and in school we only accommodate for a couple of types of learners, and so the rest of us are feeling like we're, in a strange land.
Mm-hmm.
And so with students, I put together a program called You're Smarter Than You Think, and nursing got a hold of it. In the 90s, when nursing was in need of nurses, and they were losing 80% of their students, they brought me in schools all over the country to do my program, and in one semester, everything flip-flopped, so they were saving 80% of their students.
Wow.
Wow.
So it's been, it's been great. It's in its third publication, and now we have an online training that goes with it. It's arrived at the 21st century, and so any person anywhere can go online and do the program in 2 hours, and they'll know exactly how they learn, the best way for them to learn.
You had a situation, I think it was when you were in high school with a fellow classmate, or was it college, where it flip-flopped there as well. You ended up getting an A and they got a C, as opposed to normally this person was an A student and you were.
Yeah, when I was in second grade, my best friend got moved to third, and they told her she was smarter than the rest of us. Then we met up in college and took a botany class together. And again, I got the highest grade. I got the A, she got the C.
Wow.
And it was like, what is going on here? And I didn't understand this until I read Dr. Gardner's work, and it changed everything. And I think that like 2/3 of the population have had similar experiences, and we're all walking around kind of thinking, there's this little voice in the back of our head saying, I'm not really very smart. But the truth is we're all very smart. We just don't know how to use this brain that we have on top of our heads.
Well, we're going to talk about some parallels in a little bit, because I know that Nancy, her book is about Alzheimer's, and she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And it's interesting how I want to talk a little bit about that later on, about how what you do or what you teach could play into this.
I had a question about that.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to go ahead and ask now?
Well, when I was looking this book up before we got on the show, I was curious as to what age group it targets, and then I was interested in the community where there are so many Alzheimer's patients and memory is such an issue. Would your book help in those situations?
This is interesting. Okay, number one, it's really targeted for from junior high up. You have to be at least junior high and up. And what it does is it looks at your brain talents and then shows you how to transform any learning situation that you incur into something that works for your brain. Now, I took care of my husband with vascular dementia for 10 years, so I have a deep understanding of memory loss. And I don't know if it would help them, because we're not talking about the innate intelligence. We're actually talking about where that intelligence is being eroded.
Right.
And,
or blocked, yeah.
It's like it's going away. And I know that when working with my husband, because I knew he was logical, I knew that if I kept things first, this happens, then this happens, then this happens, it helped to honor that innate tendency in working with him. So that's probably how that would play in. But as far as affecting the learning, I question that, because there's something else going on, chemically or biologically.
Yes, there is.
Way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you come up with the concept for the book? Was this all Dr. Gardner concept type?
Well, some of it is. As I said, I happened to be in a situation working with students when I read this book and had this experience. So I was throwing out ideas to the kids, and they were coming back and saying, Renee, this really works. So I just had a real deep understanding of his work. And then, because I have a master's degree in speech pathology, I knew that education was all language processing. It was listening to a lecture, reading a textbook, studying for a test, writing a paper, taking a test. All of that is language processing. You're not looking at a picture and processing it. You're processing language. So I found out that everybody has a preference for that, and it's a genetic thing. And you either want to read it, you either want to hear it, or you want to hear it and read it together. And some people have huge swings in these different areas. They get 10% in one and 10% in another and 90% in the other. And it can make a very big difference academically if you're trying to learn something.
So I'm just curious, Renee, what is the preference for the person who goes to sleep in the classroom?
Go to bed earlier.
That's really good. I love it.
You do wonder what keeps the attention span of a student. I mean, we all learn differently, and the poor teacher's up to doing the best they can in a classroom of 30 students or more. So how can you reach out to each one of these, other than what you're offering, which is somewhere they can go and take a class, online or whatever, to learn how to grasp what the teacher's trying to teach?
Well, the thing that's happening in schools right now is in a country, we do not honor learning. We only honor memorization. And there's a huge difference between the two.
Absolutely.
And students, that is freaking, that's a boring thing to do.
I'm so glad you used the word frickin'. Because we are regulated.
Teachers do not inspire their students. They think Their job is to pour the information into the student's head, and so does the student. But the truth is, learning is active. It's not passive. And you can't, it's hard to get active when you're just memorizing. But if you're really learning and keyed in, you're inspired, and you just get excited about what you're learning.
Renee, do you think that pouring the information into the kids' heads is really just a process of duplication where, what I mean is in teacher education programs, isn't that kind of how they're trained?
Probably. I haven't really exposed myself to that.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's been I don't know if it's been a conspiracy, but it sure has felt like some kind of something has taken over the last 30 years. This little thing has just crept in, and it has where we don't value learning anymore, that memorization is just fine.
Well, my experience with this, at one point I was going to be a teacher. Education was my background. And in junior high, I remember I had a math teacher. I couldn't understand a word he was saying. And he was basically a textbook teacher. Everything came straight from the book. And I learned nothing. And I thought, oh my God, I just want to get through this class. And then when I went on to high school, I started a tutoring program for the junior high, now that I was in the Future Teachers Association in high school. And we went back and started this tutoring program, and I took a student who was failing his class, the same teacher I had, and I took that student and made him an A student. And I think what the problem was is that when you teach from the textbook, which sometimes I guess that's what you're limited to, it's what you're talking about in your book is it's difficult to grasp that. There have to be other avenues open to the student to learn.
We're all different.
Yes.
Well, the thing is, you still got it backwards. You're still saying it's the teacher's responsibility to make sure the student learns.
Right.
No, it's the student's responsibility.
Right.
And what you did is you inspired that kid, and you found a way in. But ultimately, he's the one that learned.
But I think,
and that's the screw up.
Right, and I think that's the whole key, Bronx, to what we're talking about is the fact that that's the new message that needs to get out there, is teach the students how to learn, not the teachers how to teach necessarily. I mean, obviously that's a big part of it. Because it's really difficult.
Them.
Yeah, it's difficult to sit in a class when you're not getting it. And you can't raise your hand every 5 minutes, obviously, because you look like the fool. So, there has to be other ways, and it sounds like you've come up with a way. So.
Yeah, it's proven itself over time, and nursing is one of the hardest programs you can go through, and it's just made a huge difference for thousands of nurses around the country.
And Dana, do you have any questions for Renee?
Yeah, do you plan any other books, or programs? This sounds so amazing to me, and I've noticed myself that I learn in certain ways, so it's totally rings bells for me.
Well, we've just come out with this online training with the book. This is a whole new concept. It's the wave of the future, where people will bring out books, and then they'll have an online training that goes with the book, so that people can have an experience of what is written, because most people who are struggling, reading is not their best suit, but if they have this training that they can go to, it then helps them. So that's what we're focused on right now. It's the two of them together.
When it comes to the training online, if they purchase the book, is that part of the program, or are they two separate entities?
Well, at the moment, it's two separate entities, but starting in September, they're going to be a one entity. So when they go to Amazon, they will not only buy the book, but they will also buy 30 minutes of the online training.
Okay.
And we've just decided to institute this because we think it's so important, and it's proven that it really works. So we feel comfortable doing that.
Mm-hmm. Where can we learn more about your work?
My website, which is youaresmarterthanyoutthink.com. Everything written out.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And you said also you have a book available on Amazon.
Yes, the book, You're Smarter Than You Think, is available on Amazon. But if you go to my website, you can click on buy a book, and it takes you to Amazon. And if you want to buy the online training, it takes you through PayPal. And it's all, there's a bunch of videos on the website. There's 2 free giveaways. One is mistakes parents never want to make if they're sending their child to college, and the other free paper is Walking This World Not Knowing Your Brain Talent is Disastrous. And they're both free, and they're both on the first page.
Yeah. I'm just curious because we are talking about learning from life's experiences or writing from life's experiences, and obviously you've written from your whole life's experience. But did you ever set out to be an author?
Are you kidding? I'm not linguistic.
Okay.
But what I learned early on, it's okay to ask for help. So I have a great editor, and I write from my heart, and it's not probably the best language, but I have a great editor that fixes it and makes me look good.
All right, that's what they do. That's what they do.
It is the people around us, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right, our third guest. Well, first of all, I'd just like to let you know that this is KLAV, 12:30 a.m., and you can listen to this broadcast live on your computer at KLAV1230am.com. And our third guest is Nancy Nelson. Nancy is the author of Blue.River.Apple, and that's Blue period, River period, Apple period. Nancy, please tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, my background, I come from the Pacific Northwest. I was raised outside of Seattle, Washington, in a little town called Arlington. I had a fantastic childhood. My dad owned and operated a sawmill, and we had plenty of family love and lots of kids and friends and horses. We rode horses. I didn't learn how to ride a bicycle until I did a triathlon at age 60. So I'm really kind of country, but I have been here for 50 years.
Wow.
I love Las Vegas.
You're almost a native.
I am.
Yeah.
It is my home. It really is. I have raised 2 daughters here, Michelle and Jennifer, and I have 4 beautiful grandchildren. So recently, on a happy note, I retired from the insurance industry. Goodbye now.
Yeah.
And within the next couple of weeks, I'll have my first book out, and I'll be a published author, and I'm really excited about that. Yeah.
We all are.
And Dana, you have any questions?
What I'm curious as to what led you to write a book of poems.
You know what, Dana? I don't know. Can't tell you. I began waking up between 3 and 5 a.m. in the morning about 4 or 5 days after I got the diagnosis of early onset Alzheimer's. And my eyes would just flash wide open. It's dark outside, and I started writing. And so I would sit for a couple of hours, and just poems came out of me. I have never written a poem, hardly read them. Dr. Seuss, I like them when they rhyme. And so that's, I was taken back, of course, my dad had Alzheimer's, so I was aware that it was a possibility. But until you get that cold, hard facts, it doesn't seem real. And it doesn't seem real today. I haven't totally bought into it. You will hear me refer to it as the A's, because then I'm not buying into it. But so I started showing these poems to friends, and I was quite taken, and they were quite taken. And so one thing has led to another, and finally I ended up at James and doorstep and Jan, and here I am.
Well, I read some of your stuff, and it is just magnificent.
Thank you.
It really is. And you can tell it's so heartfelt. So tell me that you're not stopping here. Tell me you got something else cooking.
I do. There will be 60 poems in the first book, and I just thought that if I could write down my feelings, which go up and down and around the corners, during any given day, if I could break the gap that says we don't talk about this, that says kind of outing myself and saying, hey, I got this memory issue, and there's a better understanding from both sides, from the caregiver's side and from the patient's side. I belong to a caregivers group that is of such help for the past 2 years, and I will tell you that some people come in crying, some come in telling jokes, some people, it helps to understand why our loved ones act the way they do. Yeah. And so this is just kind of a bird's eye view of that.
Uh-huh.
And to give a little overview of Alzheimer's, I think it's a misnomer that it's something that hits you instantly. It's not quite like
oh no,
that. It can take
and
years.
as a matter of fact, yeah, they think that you have it 10 or 15 years before it actually starts showing up.
Yeah.
So
Uh-huh.
yeah, you've had it for a while, and I I can go back and tell you some incidents that I should have said, hey, what's going on, but that at the time I didn't. It was just in last September that I went to my daughters and said, I really need to look at this. And of course, they don't want to hear that.
Right.
No,
yeah.
none of us kids ever do.
No, but my dad had Alzheimer's and they didn't tell us anything. And so even though we were adults, it was a shock and it was devastating. And I'm just hoping that this way isn't quite that much of a shock and that they'll cope better.
Yeah.
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 And you already said your book will be ready in a couple of weeks. We'll have you back on the show in November,
Okay.
and then probably again in April the following year with a special guest.
Perfect.
So we're going to be able to find your book hopefully real soon on Amazon,
Right.
and we're going to get you set up with Barnes and Nobles in Henderson, and we'll announce that when the time comes.
And my website?
Oh yes, what is your website?
My website is www.Blue.River.Apple.com. www.Blue.River.Apple.com. And if you want to know Blue River Apple, those are the three test words that they give you when you go into a neurologist's office and they want to check your memory. So they give you 3 words to remember, and they test you, and if you can't remember them, they mark it off.
Mm-hmm. And that's the 3 words they gave
That's
you.
the 3 words that they gave me.
Now we're always going to be able to cheat.
Well, it's not always those words. They just
No,
happen
no.
to be the 3
Yeah.
they gave her.
Yeah, these were the 3 that they gave me.
Then I want to go and get that particular.
There you go.
All right, you are listening to Aspects of Writing with me, your host, James Kelly, here on KLAB, along with my co-host, Dana Micheli and Janet Coursey. And again, on the computer, you can listen to this broadcast live at KLAB1230am.com. Our guests for today's show are authors Linda Jarosz, Nancy Nelson, and Renee Mollan-Masters. The topic of today's show is Writing from Life's Experience, Part 2. And the last show we talked a little bit about the various aspects of writing from life's experiences. So why do authors use their own experiences in writing? And Renee, I'm going to let you read the first portion of this.
If you write about something you know nothing about, it usually just doesn't work. It would be like a guy writing about the joys of being a mother. He could probably make a good guess, but he couldn't describe the feeling as well as a real mother could.
And I would like to talk about this for a minute. I mean, because as an author, we have characters throughout our books that are of other genders,
Right.
and how do it's really difficult sometimes to master that, to get inside the mind of what someone else is doing. I suppose in the case of writing in for a mother, you would almost have to question a mom to find out what her feelings were.
Well, and in today's world, there's many, many men that stay home.
Well, that's
They're
true
the
too.
mom,
Yeah.
in the
But
mom
it's
position.
also, oh, I'm sorry.
No,
I
go
would
ahead.
I would think a good way would be to talk to some of those stay-at-home dads or read blogs on the internet
Mhm.
where they actually blog about their daily experience of getting the kids off to school and making sure they do their homework and all the other various things that are involved with parenting.
Right. And Renee, what were you going to say?
Well, I think it's kind of like an actor. They have to go within and find within themselves something that connects to that nurturing. And everybody is a nurturer. It may not be as evident, but I think a guy could get in touch with that, that nurturing piece within. I mean, if they, connect to an animal, that's similar.
Yeah, the only thing I found with talking about writing from life's experiences is there are often times, especially when you write fiction, where there are characters that you create that sometimes, like in my book, are monstrous, and you try to figure out how can you get inside the mind of this character, and you really have to do it to bring out the essence of who this character is. Everyone talks about Stephen King, like what is wrong with this guy?
Right. I can think of things like that.
But he's got a great imagination. Now, sometimes I think we pick things up from watching television or reading books, without realizing it. But I find it difficult sometimes. I mean, I've had to write a character who murdered someone, and the way he toyed with that character and Murning was like a mouse, a cat playing with a mouse.
Yeah.
And you do have to put yourself inside that mind at the time you're writing.
I think you have to get quiet within yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and I do believe the internet helps.
Yes. And your imagination.
And your imagination.
I got a fireman in mind, and I've never met one. So.
Linda?
Life is a wealth of material for writers. Most fiction is autobiographical to some extent, as writers draw from their real-world experiences. A first kiss, graduation, birth, death, marriage, divorce, career changes, the assassination of JFK, the invention of spam, both kinds. Sometimes the story is created from the tiniest real-life detail. You notice a little boy digging in the sand at the local playground, and this sparks an entire spin-off, a full-length novel about a man who makes a living digging wells.
Yeah, and that's literally how it happens. We've done experiments, a couple of times I've done experiments on the show where someone will give us an object and we create an entire story around that. And when someone gave us the story of, someone said, I have a toothbrush, and we created a murder mystery around that toothbrush one day. So that's literally how you do it. You just let the mind go, let the imagination take over.
The part about being autobiographical, too, is kind of funny. After my sister read my Detour book, she said, we have to talk, because she recognized some things in there from our family life, of course. Changed around a little bit, but you can't get away from that, I don't think.
Right.
No. And that's true even when you're writing something totally fiction. There are essence of you in that story.
Yes.
It's almost impossible not to put that in there. Because
I think there'd be something wrong if you didn't.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of your voice.
It is.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Nancy, would you like to take the next?
The biggest reason writers use their own experiences is to add depth to their stories. And I know this one for sure. That is true. Using something you've actually experienced makes it easier to describe the situation, thus making it more real to the reader.
I want to talk a little bit about, because in a way it's interesting how, Nancy, you started writing. Because I know you were writing before this, though.
I was writing a book on my triathlon.
Right. You're kind of like a memoir.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so
I got twitched by it. I couldn't keep the chapters straight.
Oh.
I didn't know that back then.
Yeah.
And I got all the way through the first, and I was going back and redoing for the second version of it, and I'm just set it aside.
But now you're going to finish it.
Well, and I think poems are easier for me because they're short. The sentences are short, the verses are, and I can keep that straight. So I'm going to go back and do the triathlon book, and I'm going to do it in poem story.
Oh, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
And Linda, you never thought about when you're growing up during your academic years, did you ever think you were going to be a writer?
I didn't think I'd be a fiction writer. I wrote stories in high school and some in college and even a little poetry, but I kind of abandoned that. It just seemed like I was going more the direction of business and then later academic writing. I was talking with a friend one day when we were talking about things that go on in the community, and I said, you could write a book about this. She says, why don't you do it? And I thought about it, and I thought, well, business writing is one type of style. It's very kind of bottom line. You get to the point. Academic is just so full of protocol and foo-for-all, I call it. And I thought, well, I'm going to try fiction. This will broaden my writing horizons. It's no less. It's no less creative. I mean, you still have to be somewhat creative with business and academic, but this is a whole kind of creativity. And now that I produced the first one, I realize I can do it. I'll continue on. But had you told me 30, 40 years ago, oh, you're gonna publish a whole fiction book, I'd say I don't think so.
And Renee, just so you know, I wasn't the smartest fish in the pond. As a matter of fact, I was in the muck most of the time. I'm just curious with you, did you ever anticipate writing? Did you ever think, well, I'm going to write something someday?
The furthest thing from my mind. I mean, it's just, as I said before, I'm not really linguistic. You would know that, but I'm really not. It's not my favorite way of communicating. But once I learned that I could ask for help, then it just took off for me.
Mm-hmm. Dana, I know you're an editor, and I think I have asked you this before. Have you ever thought about writing anything?
I have ever since I was a kid, but I can't explain it. I feel like I haven't found my story yet. I wrote some things when I was a teenager, and then it was one of those things where, writing's a risky business. You should really fall back on something. And it wasn't until after law school that I said, you know what, I'm going back to what I really wanted to do. So, and then I kind of got into the ghosting thing, which I love. And I was thinking about what you guys were saying about writing what you know, and I get to kind of write from what other people know. It's really bizarre. Like I'm ghosting a novel right now. So it's this woman's ideas.
But it's still your work.
But I get to play around and be creative with it so that it's not recognizable, because she doesn't want people to know. She doesn't want people to recognize themselves in it. So it's been such fun, but one of these days something will strike me and I'll write my own book.
So in a way, you really are writing. I mean, when you ghostwrite for someone, you really do create that story pretty much.
Yeah, it's just within their parameters.
Right.
And, the people I've worked with have been great. The give and take, brainstorming, ideas, and the ghosting clients especially, because it's not a finished product yet. The editing clients, they have what they have, and usually they want to keep that. But it's a great collaboration.
Dana, it almost sounds like you have a good jumping off point there for eventually finding your own individual voice. You have kind of the guts of a story that somebody else is writing and that you're adding to, and it just seems that would be kind of good practice for you, and eventually you could branch off onto your own story.
It's kind of the opposite. I feel like I have a voice, and I'm very careful to not use it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because I've written stuff myself. I just haven't put it out there, in a complete novel. So I'm always afraid that I don't want everything I do to sound like me. I want it to sound like them.
Then the editor needs an editor.
Yeah.
That's true.
The truth.
Good one.
You know what's interesting, though, is I never envisioned ever being an author, ever. English was my worst subject, without a doubt. And I remember as a kid, though, I had a friend in junior high, and we started what was called Transylvania Times. And it was just a little newspaper. We did the cartoons, the caricatures, and wrote the little story. It was all humorous about Frankenstein, Dracula, the werewolf, and all that. And we would go up and down the street and hand them out to people we knew, like we were delivering the paper.
That's great. James, every time I speak to you, I learn some other fascinating.
But I realized that's really where my creativity came from. I realize now that even in junior high, I was really writing. Probably would have been great if we would have continued that as a
in the mid part of your life.
or a comic book or something, and then as when you go off to college, you enter a new realm, and you find people who are much smarter than you are, and they like to tell you that sometimes. And I think that can beat you down, especially if you don't have a journalistic background, and I didn't. And I remember even when I was writing my first book, a good friend of mine who was a PhD was telling me, you'll never get that published, and you'll never be a writer.
Wow.
And it's interesting how that actually drove me to prove this person wrong.
Yes.
So I think everyone should be encouraged by the fact that it doesn't matter what your background is, and it is true that we do write from life's experiences. So I think I took all that experience and said, I'm doing this. I'm going to write this book.
Well, anybody that takes the time to sit down and write anything, if you send it off to your editor, they will make you a genius. I know I have one.
Well, you know what's interesting is mine was very crude, and I admit that. I will be the first one to tell you that it's kind of like Renee was saying, you know, I'm not a genius when it comes to writing. So that's why you do have an editor. But if you can get the plot and the characters developed on paper, someone can come along and take that and make it, you know, worthwhile.
Right.
So.
And it's okay to do that.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yours is almost like it's screenwritten.
It doesn't take anything away from you.
No.
What I'm trying to say.
No. And the best part of it all is that when you have naysayers out there, you can say, here's my book.
Yes.
And if it's well done, you can stand behind that and be very proud.
Yeah. Yep. Even if it's not well done. Just the fact that you did it.
Yes.
Does anyone have any other statements they'd like to make about writing from life's experiences?
Well, you know, mine was started off as an angry letter, as you well know, my book. And I found it was so interesting that once I decided to turn it into a book, because I knew the letter would get thrown away, is that most of my characters started writing themselves. I didn't have any trouble going from, I have a 4-year-old, a 7-year-old, 2 twin girls, a fireman, a guy who's a motorcycle rider, you know, and they just seem to kind of write themselves. Once you put yourself, give them a position that they're going to be in for that moment, then it kind of takes over. Your I guess your inner thoughts just kind of pour out what you would know a man would say or a small child would say in a particular instance.
You know, and you just hit on something that really just dawned on me. Even in developing the characters in my first book, and this is how life experiences play into this. I had a character who had to go off to Savannah, Georgia with his fiance, and he was in the Secret Service, and his buddy from the Secret Service who was going through training went with them. And I thought, this just doesn't make sense, because this young couple is going to want to be there by themselves. They're not going to want a third wheel. And I had to go back and add a character to that book. And that's really based on life's experiences. Like, we put ourselves in the place of our characters, like, would this be real? Because in reality, that wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
So in that respect, even in fiction, we write from life's experiences.
Well, and I think when you write from life's experiences, I think that you bring with you a depth that you don't see or you don't get if it's casualness or you've got a fiction person without any realism behind them.
James, it's interesting you say about thinking through how would this person think or what would they say, or keeping it realistic. I keep a journal, and I journal when I'm feeling something really strong. I'll sit down and journal, and then as time goes on, I forget how I felt about that situation. But then if I'm writing a character, I'll go back and read my journal, and okay, that's how I felt, that's how I reacted, that's realistic.
Right.
That really helps.
Yeah.
And there's also that, you touched on this, that I remember when I was putting my program together, there was an aspect of something else doing it. You know, I got into this, some kind of a flow, and it just sort of happened.
Yeah.
I think that's what happened to me in the poems. It just came to me. It was no work.
Yeah.
I think yours was saying, you've got to do this. It's do it now.
Yeah, do it now.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think the important thing is to just do a little bit, no matter how good or how bad it is. Eventually it all clicks into place. And then that's when you start feeling that in the flow, and like there's this force just kind of pushing you, and you just go along with it.
Yeah, you know, I'm currently taking a script writing class, and one of the things I will definitely use in writing future novels is the techniques they use in script writing. And one of those is to do an outline. You know, you develop your characters and your structure and whatever, and then you go back several times and you look at that and you change it. You say, what could that character do different here? And this is just in the outline structure. And you will find that if you do this several times, you can develop a story that's incredible. You know, it can really put it together in a way that you didn't think about before, and then go back and write it.
I had a history teacher that when we would go into the classroom, he would be dressed in whatever he was going to be teaching that day. If it was the Civil War or World War II.
Oh, I love it.
And he would pass out notes to everybody, and we would play parts in the day's
now that's
learning.
Yeah.
And he would say, okay, this, at this particular point, this is what happened, and this is how it ended. Okay, so now we fill in the blanks, and this is who you are. And so we lived that history, and he said, okay, well, if we did it your way, this wouldn't be how it would end. So, and that's actually how we learned the better part of history, how it really happened.
Yeah.
Now, see, that's interesting, Renee, in the sense that is a one way that a teacher can influence the students and get them to interact a little more.
Exactly. But you know what? If you interviewed all those students in that classroom, there'd be a bunch of them that say, I can't learn this way. I can't do this.
Yeah.
I
can't come up with that. Yeah.
And that's what's surprising is that we forget that we all learn differently.
Yeah.
And it isn't, you are so right. I had a lesson before I came to the studio today. And sometimes I'll sit down and I'll look at something and I'll say, this is just too hard. I can't do this. And then when I find when you sit down and you read it several times and think about it, you do find an avenue in which to take and make it easier.
You dissect it.
Yeah, you dissect
one bite at a time.
Yeah. So, all right. Dana, you have anything to add to that?
I'm just in awe of you two ladies. Just wonderful.
Well, you know what? You are a teacher in a way, if you think about it, because one of the best ways I've learned to write is through the editors that I've had in the past.
Absolutely.
Because you always learn something. Every time something is edited, you learn more. You learn your structure better. You learn the punctuation better. Everything, and even the character development. You learn like this is what they're going to be looking for. This is what the reader expects. So I just think an editor is fantastic. And anyone who thinks they can write a book and not have one, well, good luck.
Crazy.
Well, I mean, it's two-way street because I've learned so much from my clients about whatever they're writing about. It's awesome. They could be writing about spirituality or teaching or medical issues or whatever. That's like one of my favorite parts of my job is because they're the expert and I get to learn from them too. So it's really cool.
Dana, do you have a specific genre that you like to edit for?
I really like everything. I'm kind of one of those widows. Just kind of really, I mean, I guess if I had to choose, it would be fiction. But when it comes to, editing, I prefer fiction, but I edit everything. But,
all right.
But, I really do love everything.
We're running into the last minute of the show here, so I'd like to thank our guests, Linda.
Thank you.
Jarosz, Nancy Nelson, and Renee Mollan-Masters, along with my co-hosts Janet Coursey and Dana Micheli. Our next live broadcast will be Tuesday, August 12th at 2 o'clock p.m. Pacific Time. For our future guest lineup, please visit the website at aspectsofwriting.com. Aspects of Writing broadcasts live every other Tuesday at 2 o'clock Pacific Standard Time here on KLAV, 12:30 a.m. on the dial. And on your computer, you can listen to this broadcast live at KLAV1230am.com. This show rebroadcasts on VegasAllNetRadio.com every Friday at 5 p.m. Please visit our website on VegasAllNetRadio.com, and our past shows are also archived there. To view the recorded broadcast of the show after we're done, just go to youtube.com/aspects of writing on your computer, and the show will be posted immediately after the broadcast. Until next time, this is your host, James Kelly, reminding you, if you can dream it, you can write it. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.